You know, sometimes the deepest wounds aren't inflicted with a shout, but with a quiet observation written down in a file you were never meant to see. Sometimes the most devastating sabotage doesn't come from a dramatic explosion, but from the silent, steady drip of undermining comments designed to erode your value until you simply disappear. I learned this lesson the hard way about 5 years back in an office that hummed with the low thrum of outdated computers and the even lower thrum of simmering, unspoken frustrations. It wasn't a particularly remarkable place. Standard corporate carpets, fluorescent lights that buzzed just enough to get under your skin if you paid attention, the smell of slightly burnt coffee hanging in the air. My title was something vague like support specialist or operations assistant. In reality, I was the guy who made things work. The digital plumber, the ghost in the machine. You see, I'd landed in an environment where technological literacy wasn't just low, it was practically subterranean. We're talking about folks who were experts in their field, decades of experience, but who treated their computers like volatile, unpredictable beasts. Good people, mostly, set in their ways. Take Bill, for example. Solid guy, knew his accounts inside and out, but his process for transferring client data between our main system and a reporting program, painful. He'd meticulously right-click, select copy, navigate 3 menus deep in the other program, find paste from clipboard, and then repeat hundreds of times a day. He showed it to me once, proud as could be. "See, kid," he'd said, tapping the screen, "saves you retyping everything." He genuinely thought he was imparting some arcane wisdom. Bless his heart. He probably spent 3, maybe 4 hours a day just doing that. Me? I saw that and thought, there has to be a better way. I wasn't trying to show anyone up. I like efficiency. I like solving puzzles. So late one evening, fueled by lukewarm coffee and the quiet satisfaction of figuring things out, I wrote a simple script. A little piece of code that watched a specific folder, grabbed the data, reformatted it, and injected it right where it needed to go in the other system. Click, click, done. What took Bill half a day? My script did in about 90 seconds, running automatically every hour. Did I tell Bill, number, why complicate things? It just became part of my routine. Check the script, make sure it ran, move on. That was just one example. There were dozens of little fixes, automations, silent improvements I'd woven into the fabric of our daily operations. I figured conservatively, I was saving the company maybe 15, 20 man-hours every single day, on top of my own 8.5-hour workload. Did anyone notice? Not really. My work was invisible. Like good plumbing, nobody thinks about it until it breaks. I got paid okay, not great, but I genuinely liked helping people, liked making their days a little smoother, even if they didn't know how or why. It was comfortable, predictable, until he showed up. We were in our usual Monday morning team meeting, discussing upcoming projects, weekend hiccups, the usual rundown, and then the door opened, and he walked in. Nobody had announced him. He just appeared, mid-50s, maybe early 60s. White hair combed, but somehow still messy, like he'd wrestled a comb through it and lost. Thick glasses magnifying slightly suspicious eyes, a face that looked permanently scrunched, like he'd just bitten into a lemon. He didn't introduce himself, just found an empty chair in the corner, pulled out a notepad and started writing, watching, listening. Our boss, Dave, a decent enough manager, though clearly a bit flustered by the unexpected guest, just gave a curt nod. "Ah, Mr. Stern, joining us today, that was it." Stern just nodded back, his pen never stopping. The air in the room shifted, became heavier, colder. We tried to continue as normal, but everyone was aware of the silent observer in the corner. At one point, discussing a client file, someone mentioned a name, let's call her Mrs. Peterson. Trying to place her, I piped up, mostly thinking aloud, "Oh, Peterson, is that the tall lady, maybe 6 feet, short blonde hair?" Met someone like that down by reception last week. It was an honest guess. I mostly dealt with data, not faces. Dave shook his head. No, that's Mrs. Abernathy. Peterson is the one with the small business account downtown. Brunette, glasses. Ah, right, I said, and the conversation moved on. A totally insignificant exchange. Forgettable, or so I thought. Stern stayed for the whole meeting, filling pages of his notepad. When it ended, he simply stood up, tucked the notepad under his arm, gave another one of those non-committal nods, and left. We all looked at each other. Who was that? Someone whispered. Dave just shrugged, looking uneasy. Consultant, he mumbled. Upper management brought him in. Efficiency review, I think. An efficiency review. That sounded corporate, maybe harmless. But the way Stern had watched us, the intensity in his gaze behind those thick lenses, it felt less like reviewing efficiency and more like assessing prey. Over the next week, that feeling only intensified, especially for me. Stern became a fixture, a silent shadow drifting through the office. But his silence wasn't neutral. Around me, it felt pointed. If I spoke in a group conversation, he'd pointedly look away, maybe examine his pen, or suddenly find something fascinating on the ceiling. A couple of times when I offered a suggestion, I heard it faint but unmistakable scoff. Who scoffs anymore? It felt theatrical, deliberate, calculated. He was clearly isolating me, subtly marking me out. But why? I worked hard, I was competent, I kept my head down, solved problems. What possible reason could he have? The uncertainty gnawed at me. It threw me off my game. Coinciding with this was one of the most brutal work weeks I'd ever experienced. A critical system migration had gone sideways, client data was tangled, and everyone was stressed. Phones rang constantly, emails piled up, tempers frayed. People weren't just stressed, they were yelling. The pressure was immense. I was pulling long hours, barely sleeping, plagued by anxiety that jolted me awake at 3 a.m., heart pounding, mind racing through error logs and contingency plans. By Friday afternoon, I was running on fumes, desperately searching for a set of corrupted backup files needed for an urgent restore. I was digging deep into the labyrinthine structure of our shared network drive, far deeper than I usually needed to go. Using the search function, typing in fragments of old project names, hoping for a hit. And then something odd popped up in the search results. A folder structure nested within a drive partition usually reserved for system backups. It wasn't a standard company folder name. It was just labeled Stern Notes. My breath caught. Curiosity, maybe a prickle of dread, made me click it. Inside were subfolders, dates, department names, and one folder labeled with the name of Ardement. My heart started hammering against my ribs. I clicked again. Files appeared, Word documents named after my colleagues, and one named after me. My hand was trembling as I double-clicked my name. The document opened, and I felt the blood drain from my face. It wasn't just notes. It was a meticulously crafted dossier, a case file, filled with observations, critiques, twisted interpretations. Stern wasn't an efficiency consultant, he was a hatchet man. A corporate hitman brought in to find justifications, however flimsy, to trim the headcount, to save the executives a few bucks on payroll, and his current target was me. I scrolled numbly through the pages, each sentence a little stab. Mischaracterizations of my work, vague accusations of not being a team player because I didn't join the water cooler gossip. And then near the top, under a recent date, I saw it, a reference to that meeting. It read, "Subject my name demonstrated alarming lack of attention to detail when discussing client Peterson, female, approx. 5'4", 120 pounds, age 45. Subject mistakenly identified her as a tall lady, maybe 6 feet, short blonde hair. Inability to recall basic client identifiers suggests significant cognitive gaps or disengagement incompatible with role requirements. He hadn't just misheard or misinterpreted. He'd invented the details I supposedly got wrong, contrasting them with the actual details of a completely different person, Dave mentioned later, and framed my simple, incorrect guess as a catastrophic failure of competence. It was malicious, it was deliberate, it was a lie constructed to justify my termination. Reading those words after the week I'd had, knowing how much invisible work I did, how much value I actually provided, something inside me snapped. The exhaustion, the anxiety, the simmering resentment at being undervalued, the sheer injustice of this cold, calculating takedown, it all coalesced into a single, chilling point of clarity. Fine. You want to assess my value? You want to see what happens when I'm not here? All right then, let's run the experiment. There's a peculiar kind of cold fury that settles in when you realize you're being systematically dismantled by someone who doesn't even have the decency to look you in the eye while they do it. It wasn't hot anger, not the kind that makes you want to shout or slam a fist on the desk. No, this was colder, sharper. It was the chilling realization that the game was rigged, and the only way to win was to refuse to play by their rules. Stern, Sergeant Fuckface, as I'd mentally nicknamed him by then. Yeah, crude, I know, but it fit the sneering contempt I felt radiating from him. Thought he was dissecting my job, looking for fat to trim. He had no idea he was actually poking at the load-bearing beams I'd quietly installed over the years. That weekend wasn't about despair, though the anxiety still gnawed at the edges. It was about strategy. I sat at my home computer, the glow of the monitor reflecting in my glasses, and I started mapping it out, not with anger, but with a kind of detached precision. What processes had I automated? Who depended on them? What would happen if they just stopped? There was Bill's data transfer, of course. That was the obvious one. Then there was the script that automatically compiled the weekly regional sales figures into a spreadsheet for the Monday morning meeting, saving the regional manager about 3 hours of frantic Sunday night work. There was the automated alert system that monitored inventory levels and flagged items needing reorder before they ran out, preventing stock shortages that used to plague us. There was the routine I wrote to clean up and archive old project files, keeping the shared drive from choking on digital clutter. The script that generated customer service follow-up reminders based on ticket closure dates. The one that cross-referenced shipping manifests with delivery confirmations. On and on it went. Little threads of code, invisible gears I'd built into the daily grind, making everything run just a little bit smoother, faster, easier. Each one, on its own, might seem minor, but together, they formed an ecosystem of efficiency that everyone took for granted. An ecosystem maintained entirely by me, off the books, often outside of work hours, simply because I saw a need and had the ability to fill it. An ecosystem, Stern, in his arrogant quest for cost-cutting, was completely oblivious to. He saw me as dead weight, fine. Let him see what the ship sailed like with that dead weight suddenly removed. The plan formed quickly, elegantly even. It wasn't about confrontation. It wasn't about pleading my case to Dave, my boss, who seemed either intimidated by Stern or complicit in his silence. No, this was about demonstration. Undeniable, unavoidable proof of value. First, the emails. I drafted 3. One, addressed to Dave, politely informing him I was utilizing 2 weeks of accrued vacation time, effective immediately. I scheduled it to send at 10 p.m. that Sunday night, late enough that he wouldn't see it until Monday morning, but officially logged before the work week began. 2, a broader email to the main department distribution list, stating I would be out of office for an unforeseen period and unable to assist with ongoing tasks. Any urgent matters should be directed elsewhere. I scheduled this one for 4 a.m. Monday morning. A little pre-dawn surprise. 3, the masterpiece. An autoresponder for my work email account. Simple, direct. Thank you for your email. I am currently out of the office for an unknown duration and will not have access to email. For any and all work-related matters, including routine tasks, urgent requests, or emergency situations, please contact Mr. Stern directly at Stern's temporary extension and email. He is managing operational continuity during my absence. I triple-checked Stern's contact information. Perfect. Let the designated efficiency expert handle everything. Then came the final, crucial step. One by one, I logged into the servers, navigated to the hidden directories where my scripts resided. And with a series of quiet clicks, I disabled every single automated task I had ever created. The sales report compiler, the inventory alerter, bills data transfer helper, the archive cleaner, the follow-up generator, the shipping cross-referencer, everything. It felt like pulling the plug on a life support system nobody knew the patient was on. A strange mix of trepidation and grim satisfaction washed over me. Before leaving the office that Friday afternoon, knowing I wouldn't be back Monday, I made one last stop. Stern was in his temporary cubicle, hunched over his laptop, probably typing up more damning fiction about my colleagues. I paused at the entrance. He glanced up, annoyance flickering in his eyes. "Just wanted to say," I offered, keeping my voice level, neutral, "I think I might have found a way to make your job evaluating our workflow significantly easier starting next week." He didn't turn his head, just raised a single, skeptical eyebrow. The corner of his mouth twitched, maybe suppressing another scoff. "Good luck," I said quietly and walked away. The ambiguity felt delicious. Monday morning arrived, my work phone, sitting on my kitchen counter, started buzzing around 8:15 a.m., then again at 8:30. A text message alert pinged. Another call. I ignored them all. Turned the phone on silent. Let the storm break without me. I imagined the scene. Dave arriving, seeing my email. The department email landing. The first few colleagues hitting a snag, data not where it should be, reports not appearing, the initial confusion, maybe annoyance. Where's Frosty? Let's call me Frosty. Feels right for the chill I was sending their way. Then the dawning realization as more and more routine processes failed to execute. The calls and emails starting to flood in, all hitting my autoresponder, all pointing fingers directly at Sergeant Fuckface. Tuesday, I imagined, would be worse. Tasks with a 24-hour turnaround would now be visibly failing. Bill would be drowning in manual data entry, probably complaining loudly. The regional manager would be breathing down Dave's neck about the missing sales figures. Inventory alerts wouldn't trigger. Maybe a crucial component would run out. The carefully balanced Jenga tower of daily operations, held together by my invisible code, would be starting to wobble. Seriously, wobble. Wednesday was tough. The silence on my end felt heavy. Anxiety flared up. Did I go too far? Would this backfire spectacularly? Was I burning a bridge I might need later? I forced myself to stay offline, to trust the process. I thought about Stern, picturing his scrunched face, contorting further as he was bombarded with problems he had no context for, no idea how to solve. Problems I used to handle silently, problems whose very existence proved the value he was trying to deny. I imagined him trying to delegate, only to find that the people he was delegating to were already swamped, doing the manual work my scripts used to handle. The ripple effect. Chaos, born from quiet competence withdrawn. I told myself, if they could manage without me for 2 weeks, fine. Stern wins, I move on, lesson learned. But I didn't think they could. I knew the tangled dependencies I'd created, the sheer volume of work I'd absorbed. It wasn't arrogance, it was just fact. The system was built around my hidden contributions. Thursday evening, just as doubt was really starting to creep in, an email landed in my personal inbox. The subject line simply read, "Checking in." It was from Dave, my boss. My heart gave a lurch. This was it, the moment of truth. Seeing Dave's name pop up in my personal email felt different. It bypassed the corporate wall, the official channels. This wasn't just a manager reaching out. This felt like something else. Maybe desperation, maybe acknowledgement. I let it sit there for a few minutes, the unread notification, a small blinking beacon on my screen. Taking a deep breath, I clicked it open. The tone was unexpected. Gone was the usual managerial jargon, the careful corporate speak. This sounded like Dave, the actual human being, tired and maybe a little desperate. It started straightforwardly enough. Frosty, hope you're doing okay. Things have been challenging here this week. A masterpiece of understatement, I thought, a wry smile touching my lips. Then it shifted. Look, I know you're a smart guy. Probably smarter than I gave you credit for. I suspect you figured out what Mr. Stern's consultancy was really about long before this week. There it was. An admission. Not a direct apology, not yet, but an acknowledgement that I wasn't paranoid, that Stern's presence was malicious, and that Dave knew it. He continued, I know asking you to call me probably isn't the right move right now, judging by the automated response system you set up. A hint of grudging admiration there? Maybe. But I needed to reach out. He went on to describe the situation, painting a picture of escalating chaos, key reports missing deadlines, routine processes grinding to a halt, client data getting bottlenecked, colleagues overwhelmed, spending hours on tasks that used to take minutes. And Stern, apparently Sergeant Fuckface, was completely out of his depth, deflecting blame, barking orders, making things worse. The efficiency expert was proving remarkably inefficient when faced with actual operational demands. The irony wasn't lost on me. It's become abundantly clear, Dave wrote, the words practically jumping off the screen, just how much you were actually doing around here. Things we didn't even realize were happening. Processes we took for granted. You were holding up more than we knew. Vindication. It washed over me, warm and satisfying. He wasn't just guessing. The system falling apart was providing undeniable proof. My silent withdrawal had spoken louder than any argument I could have made. Then came the crucial lines. I've had several forceful conversations with Stern's superiors this week, explained that his assessment was fundamentally flawed, that his presence was actively detrimental to our operations, and that removing one of our most valuable team members based on his skewed observations would be catastrophic. As of this afternoon, Mr. Stern will no longer be affiliated with our site. His assignment has been terminated. Gone. Just like that. My quiet, calculated withdrawal had done what direct confrontation never could have. It had exposed Stern not as an expert, but as a fraud whose meddling actively harmed the company he claimed to serve. The system protected itself, eventually, once the damage became undeniable. The email wasn't finished. Frosty, I understand if you're already looking elsewhere. You have every right to be. Maybe you've even found something new. I sincerely hope not. Because what this week has shown us, shown me, shown everyone upstairs, is that we haven't valued you appropriately, not even close. He laid it out. When you feel ready, please reach out. I'd like to discuss your return, and I've been authorized to offer you a significant compensation adjustment. It's become painfully obvious how essential you are. Believe me, I've heard about it nonstop every single day. He named the figure, a $10,000 raise. Not life-changing money, perhaps, but in that context, it felt like a victory banner. Recognition finally made tangible. I read the email twice, 3 times. The relief was immense, but it was mixed with a lingering trace of bitterness. Why did it take setting the house on fire for them to finally notice the guy who'd been quietly putting out sparks all along? Why did Dave need the C-suite breathing down his neck before he stood up for me? He claimed Stern's boss was the issue, that his hands were tied until the chaos erupted. Maybe corporate structures are weird like that. Pressure flows downwards, but accountability often only flows upwards when things go spectacularly wrong. But dwelling on the why felt less important than the outcome. Stern was gone, my value was acknowledged, I had leverage. I waited until Friday afternoon, letting them stew just a little bit longer. Then I replied to Dave's email. Simple, professional. Thank you for reaching out, Dave. I appreciate the update regarding Mr. Stern and the compensation adjustment. I believe a conversation is in order. I will be in the office on Monday morning at 9 a.m. to discuss my return and the path forward. No apologies from my end, no explanations, just a calm assertion of my position. The tables hadn't just turned. I'd flipped the whole damn table over, and they were the ones scrambling to pick up the pieces. The ghost in the machine was about to make his presence felt, very visibly. Walking back into that office on Monday morning felt surreal. It was the same carpet, same buzzing lights, same faint coffee smell, but the atmosphere was entirely different. The usual low hum of activity seemed subdued, replaced by a palpable sense of fragility, maybe relief. Heads turned as I walked towards my old desk. There were hesitant smiles, nods of acknowledgement. Bill, the copy-paste guy, gave me a wide-eyed look that seemed to say, "Thank God you're back," though he didn't voice it. The silence of my absence had clearly left its mark. Stern's temporary cubicle was conspicuously empty, cleared out, as if he'd never been there, a ghost exorcised from the machine. My meeting with Dave was prompt. He looked tired, but also genuinely relieved to see me. He closed his office door, offered me coffee, which I accepted, and got straight to the point. "Frosty," he began, leaning forward. "First, let me apologize. Sincerely, I should have pushed back harder against Stern from the start. I knew his reputation, knew what he was trying to do. But, well, pressure from above, you know how it is." He looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat. "It's not an excuse, but it's the reality. It took things completely falling apart for them to listen." I nodded slowly, accepting the apology, but not entirely buying the powerlessness narrative. Still, progress was progress. "I appreciate that, Dave," I said evenly. "The raise I mentioned is confirmed," he continued quickly, "effective immediately, 10,000, and we need to talk about your role. Clearly, support specialist doesn't cut it. We need to formalize what you actually do, maybe create a new position, process automation lead or something. With appropriate compensation and resources." We talked for an hour about the systems I'd built, the potential for further improvements, done officially this time, with proper documentation and support, about the need for better tech literacy training for the team. It was the most productive conversation we'd ever had. He was finally listening, not just hearing, but understanding the value I brought, the value that had been invisible until it was violently withdrawn. Did everything magically become perfect? Of course not. Life isn't a fairy tale. Some colleagues remained slightly wary, perhaps intimidated by the demonstration of power I'd inadvertently wielded. There was an awkward period of readjustment as I carefully, selectively brought some of my automated systems back online, documenting them properly this time, making sure their existence and function were known. Some processes management decided needed to remain manual for oversight reasons, even if less efficient, fine by me. My point had been made, but the core injustice had been rectified. Stern, the corporate hatchet man who preyed on perceived weakness and fabricated justifications, faced his own form of accountability. He didn't just leave our location. Word got around. His efficiency methods were exposed as disruptive and damaging. His reputation, at least within certain circles, took a significant hit. Justice in the corporate world often looks like a loss of influence, a tarnished name, a contract not renewed. It might not be prison bars, but for someone like Stern, whose currency was intimidation and perceived authority, it was a fitting consequence. And me? I got the raise. I got the recognition. More importantly, I regained a sense of control over my own narrative. I hadn't sought revenge in the traditional sense. I hadn't schemed to hurt Stern personally. I'd simply withdrawn my labor, my hidden contributions, and let the natural consequences unfold. I let the system reveal its own dependencies, its own truths. My revenge was simply allowing reality to assert itself in my absence. Looking back, the whole ordeal taught me a few things. It reinforced the quiet power of competence, the value of knowing your worth even when others don't see it. It showed me that sometimes the most effective action is strategic inaction. Stepping back, letting the pieces fall where they may, can sometimes illuminate the truth far more effectively than shouting from the rooftops. It also served as a stark reminder about the often invisible labor that keeps things running in workplaces, in families, in communities. The quiet fixers, the problem solvers who work behind the scenes, their contributions are frequently underestimated until they're gone. And it highlighted the corrosive nature of corporate cultures that prioritize short-term cost-cutting over long-term stability and employee value, sending in mercenaries like Stern to slash and burn without understanding the ecosystem they're destroying. I didn't stay at that company forever. The raise and newfound respect were nice, but the underlying culture hadn't fundamentally changed overnight. Eventually, I moved on to a place that valued proactive innovation from the outset, but I never forgot the lesson of Sergeant Fuckface and the week the machine ground to a halt. It wasn't about gloating or payback. It was about demonstrating an undeniable truth. Sometimes justice doesn't announce itself with trumpets. Sometimes it arrives quietly, decisively, in the echoing silence left behind when the ghost in the machine finally decides to take a vacation. And sometimes that silence speaks volumes.